Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for January the 18th. Today we're reading together in Genesis chapter 23. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let me go and get the text up on the screen for us of Genesis 23, which is discussing the death of Sarah and her burial. And this is a bit of a unique chapter because there are very few ladies within Scripture whose deaths are mentioned, deaths and burial is mentioned. And then there are even fewer, actually, it seems that Sarah is the only one of whom her age is actually identified at her birth. We see that throughout a number of genealogies and other important characters in Scripture. But here we have Sarah, which, of course, she is a very important figure within Scripture, being the mother of the promised nation. And for that, she gets a great deal of attention here at her burial. So let's read together here in Genesis 23. In verse number 1, now Sarah lived 127 years. These were all the years of her life. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. When Abraham got up from beside his dead wife, he spoke to the Hethites, I am an alien residing among you. Give me burial property among you so that I can bury my dead. The Hethites replied to Abraham, Listen to us, my Lord. You are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in our finest burial place. None of us will withhold from you his burial place for burying your dead. Then Abraham rose and bowed to the Hethites and the people of the land. He said to them, If you are willing for me to bury my dead, listen to me and ask Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf, to give me the cave of Machpelah that belongs to him. It is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me in your presence for the full price as burial property. Ephron was sitting among the Hethites. So in the hearing of all the Hethites who came to the gate of his city, Ephron the Hethite answered Abraham, No, my lord, listen to me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the sight of my people. Bury your dead. Abraham bowed down to the people of the land and said to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, Listen to me, if you please. Let me pay the price of the field. Accept it from me, and let me bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham and said to him, My lord, listen to me. Land worth 400 shekels of silver? What is that between you and me? Bury your dead. Abraham agreed with Ephron, and Abraham weighed out to Ephron the silver they agreed to in the hearing of the Hethites, 400 standard shekels of silver. So Ephron's field at Machpelah near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees anywhere within the boundaries of the field, became Abraham's possession in the sight of all the Hethites who came to the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field at Machpelah near Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and its cave passed from the Hethites to Abraham as burial property. And that is Genesis chapter 23. As I mentioned here within the text, it is very unique to have the details of the burial of the details of the burial of a woman. It is a unicorn, in fact, for her age to be mentioned. She is said to have lived 127 years, so she has lived as the mother of Isaac for about 37 years at this time. She died in the land of Canaan, and the text says that Abraham went in to mourn for her. And the language that is used here, to mourn and to weep, is a very strong reaction. It would have been carrying out all the normal, well, I guess not normal, all the most extreme reaction to death, which have been shaving of the beard or cutting of the beard. It would have been throwing dust in the air, ripping of clothes. Just all of this would have been taking place at this time. And of course, it makes sense whenever you're married to someone for at least 70 years, 70 plus years for sure. The reaction here is very, very real. And especially considering everything that Abraham and Sarah had gone through and the hopelessness that they had once felt, and then the hope that they had through Isaac, this would have been a very emotional time for Abraham. Now, again, he's a man. He says, I'm an alien. He's a man who did not have land of his own within Canaan, within anywhere, really, for that matter. he had a place where he stayed and near the oaks of Mamre, but it was not his land yet. And the Lord even said it would not be given to him. It would be given to his descendants. So he has to ask the Hethites where he is at this time for some land in order to bury his dead, or his dead wife specifically. The discussion that takes place here between Abraham and the Hethites, whether it be Ephron or these other ones, you might notice that it was extremely polite, very, very, very generous in the way they spoke with one another, referring to one another as Lord. Here, him being referred to, Abraham being referred to as the Prince of God, just offering, just seemingly going out of their way to appease one another and to be kind in the situation. That was just kind of the way that these type of negotiations went in the ancient Near East. Oftentimes, whenever they would make an offer, they would expect for the first offer to be rejected, and then they would make a high offer, and that's whenever kind of negotiating would take place. So notice here that Abraham asked for burial property so that he could bury the dead. They said, okay, well, we're not going to give you property, but we will give you a burial place. Abraham says, well, I'd much rather just buy something. That way it's not given to me. We'll talk about why that might be here in a second. And then he specifies, there's a place down there at the end of a field. It's Ephron's field. It's possible that the city that they're in is his city, like he's the king of the city. And he's asking for, at the end of the field, I don't want to encroach. I don't want to impede upon your property. I just need a little place in order to bury my wife so that we can move on. And he offers in verse 9 that, I'm going to pay a full price for it. Abraham's not looking for a handout. He wants to be fair. He wants to be honest in these dealings. And again, he doesn't want something to just be given to him. This is supposed to be the land that he's going to possess is going to be a gift from God. And it might be that he's not wanting any pagan to be able to say that you gave me the land. It needs to be given to him directly from God. That's a possibility that might be in his mind. Well, once they get to the city and they offer this, or it seems that the setting for this is in the city gate. Again, we made mention before, this is where all the important business was done. Ephron is among the Hethites, and they have this discussion, and Ephron says, hey, I'll just give you the field. I'll give it to you, and that'll be that. Abraham again says, appreciate that, bows down to him, says, no, I want to pay the price. I want to pay the full price. I want to be fair with it. And again, they're being overly generous, overly kind, very polite to one another. Ephron, verse 15 says, no, what's 400 shekels of silver between friends, basically? I'll just give it to you. Well, that's all Abraham needed to hear. It's very well that 400 pieces or 400 shekels of silver might have been an exorbitant price for this land. But Abraham doesn't want to, he doesn't try to haggle. He doesn't try to negotiate. Maybe there's a lesson for us there. We shouldn't be overly frugal with others. Be fair. Don't try to just nickel and dime as much as we can. Let's be fair with people. That's what Abraham does. Abraham's even willing to pay maybe what might be an unfair price to make sure that it said that he bought it for himself and that it was not something given to him by a pagan. Kind of reminds me of what happened back whenever he rescued Lot from the Canaanite kings. And remember, the king of Sodom wanted to give him some stuff. He's like, nope, I don't want that. Maybe something along those lines is happening here as well. So eventually they count out the shekels of silver. Abraham does this in the sight of all the Hethites. Again, everything's on the up and up. Everything's being fair. Everything's being accounted for. And the text tells us that Ephron's field at Machpelah was near Mamre, which is about as close to a normal residence as Abraham had. And at that time, Abraham did bury his wife in the cave of the field at Machpelah, near Mamre, in the land of Canaan. The field with its cave passed from the Hethites to Abraham as burial property. Why is this here? Why is this text here? Well, of course, as we mentioned, it has to do, I think, with the importance of Sarah being the mother of all Israel. She is the one from whom Isaac came and from whom all the descendants would eventually come. So I think that shows the importance of her role within the historical narrative and story of Israel. But as well, we have to keep in mind that in the ancient Near East context, where your bones were buried was a big deal. Like, that mattered. And where your bones were buried was where you would consider home. But think about to later on in the text with Abraham himself. I think especially about Joseph. Joseph made his family promise that they would take his bones back to Canaan and bury them there. So what is happening here then is that Abraham, in burying Sarah in Canaan, is showing his realization of this being the promised land. He is showing his confidence that this will be the land that the descendants end up possessing and making their own. Again, Abraham's not going to get this. And he knows as well that they're not going to get this land officially for a long time. You know, the 400 years being in a foreign land and all that's been mentioned previously. So this is definitely a sign of faith. I really appreciate what Nathan Ward writes himself and then cites from a few people within his commentary. The growth of the seed. He says, by leaving their bones in Canaan, the patriarchs gave their last witness to the promise. And he's quoting from Derek Kidner in that sentence. He goes on to write, the presence of this tomb in the land when the Israelites came so many years later was an eloquent testimony to them that Abraham was sure of God's promises. Burial, or he said, in addition to this purchase, he conclusively rejected Ur and Mesopotamia. Burial in one's homeland was and still is important. Though Abraham never owned land, and though he lived with a "this world is not my home" attitude, he showed that his home dwelt in the promises of God, which was Canaan. Abraham showed that he believed the promises of God by making plans, basically, to go ahead and be buried there as well. And what a great act of faith this is. Again, a very difficult time for Abraham here in Genesis 23 with the loss of his spouse. But he continues to show faithfulness in God's promises and burying her where he believed his family would forever reside. And that certainly is an encouraging sign. Again, we've just seen in the previous chapter the climax of Abraham's faith, and we continue to see that faith as we move forward within the story, seeing here that where the bones are buried matters. And he wanted his wife's bones to be buried in the promised land, not a land that he had yet, but a land that he was confident God would provide in the future. And of course, we're going to see later on that the exact same thing is true for Abraham. Let me see here if I can find that real fast. Yeah, it's in chapter 25, and we're going to see him being buried here as well. Appreciate you tuning in for this reading on this Wednesday. Looking forward to being together tonight for our Bible study as we begin looking at the characteristics of those who are to lead the Lord's local churches. We'll be in 1 Timothy 3 and also Titus 1 tonight. Really looking forward to that study, and for everyone who's going to be there tonight for our other classes as well. Again, have a great rest of your Wednesday, everyone. Take care. God bless, and we'll be back at it again tomorrow as we read together from Genesis chapter 24, where we go on the search for a wife for Isaac. See you then. Take care. God bless.